Hello, I have just been informed that I look pretty good, so I'm gonna count that as a win. So, in case you're new here, I'm Jessica Day George. Welcome to my office, and I will be answering some reader questions today. This is the second half of my Corona edition Ask Me Anything, and at the end of this video, I am going to announce 2 winners of free signed books. Yay! But first, we have Kat with a K who asks, what is the first thing you would tell an aspiring young author, such as myself? This is an excellent question, and I will answer you in song. Just keep swimming, la 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 la. The most important thing you can do is to just keep going. If you get stuck on a story, if you feel like you're a terrible writer, if somebody reads your story and says they hate it, it doesn't matter. Just keep going. The most important thing a writer can have is persistence. You will get better. Your stories will get better. You will be able to finish them. If you just keep going, you will get there and become an author. So that is my advice for you, Kat. Sela asks, I hope I'm saying that right, Sela, how do you do your research? How does your research process work when writing your books? Also, do you have a favorite scene from the Princesses of Westphalen trilogy? Would you consider writing more books or short stories, either about the sisters or set in their world? So an excellent series of questions, some of my favorite of my books. My research theory is called the pasta theory. That is what I have named it. Pasta, supposedly, when it is done, you throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. And that is what I do with research. I don't do a lot of intensive research because most of my books I've made up the worlds, but what I do is I do read a lot of books about just things that interest me. Germany, fairy tales, Norse mythology, and then I'll read them and read them and read them, and then whatever has stuck in my brain after I've finished that book, I consider that like an important fact or information that will need to go in a book. So that's the pasta theory. If you remember it, it sticks. That's probably something you're going to want to use in your book. Mostly my serious research was for a book called Silver in the Blood, which is probably my all-time favorite thing I've ever written. And in Silver in the Blood, because it was set in a real time, in a real place, I looked up the fashions of the time. I went to Romania and took a guided tour to make sure that I did have my details accurate, because I was not making up that world. It was a real place. And so that was the most research I've ever done. I spent about 3 months just reading books about how the book Dracula was written and the real guy who was Dracula and just things like that to go in that book. And probably 30% of my research made it to the book, which is pretty standard. So I don't do a ton of research. But for the princesses, though, well, it is a trilogy, as you yourself said in the question. So there are just 3 books. I did consider making a 4th, and then I came up with another way to use the fairy tale I had planned on using. I was going to use the Snow Queen story, and then I came up with a better way to use that in a different series that's going to be called Stolen Crowns, that's coming out someday eventually. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to let those girls live happily ever after. I don't want to do any side stories or anything because I feel like they've sort of been through enough too. So they get to live happily ever after, but my favorite scenes are, try not to be too spoilery, but in the 3rd book, Hyacinth, the really super nice sister, smacks somebody across the face, and I really enjoyed writing about that. And also in the 2nd book, Princess of Glass, the whole part with the glass slippers at the end and her glass slipper is broken and her foot is cut and stuff, that was just really, really fun to write, because it's the thing about Cinderella that's always bothered me, is if you're wearing glass shoes and like somebody steps on your foot or something, like what happens? And so I enjoyed writing that a lot. Mary asks, when is your next book coming out? I'm excited to read the next installment of The Rose Legacy. I am so excited for you guys to read this. So my next book is coming out, unless there is a pandemic-related problem, and I have literally just 5 minutes ago gotten an email from my editor saying, nope, it's still coming out on actually June 16th. They originally told me June 2nd, and it turns out that was a typo. So it's coming out June 16th. It should still be coming out then. It's called The Writer's Reign. It is the last book in the Rose Legacy trilogy, and I'm very excited about it because when I first came up with the idea for this series, I basically, what popped into my head was the first chapter of the first book, and then also the ending scene of this 3rd book, and that is pretty much the same as I imagined it, so I'm super jazzed for everyone to finally get to read it, because it's been over 10 years I've been working on this series off and on, and so I'm excited that you guys get to see it. So, but that will be middle of June. And I am, by the way, planning on doing some sort of event with the King's English here in Salt Lake. It might just be a virtual event where I record a little video that they play or do story time through their Facebook or something like that. And then you can still order signed books through them, and we'll do like curbside pickup where I will drop off the books and blah, blah, blah. It'll be a whole thing, but it'll be totally safe. We'll do what we can to make sure everybody stays healthy. Then Abby, through Kaylin, I'm guessing that's her mom, asks, will there be any more novels in the Princesses of Westphalen series? Because I love them. Thanks, I love them too. But no, it is just a trilogy. But I am still working on some stuff with them, in that I am now having my husband help me put all the knitting patterns I made up for that series are going to go up on my website. So if you knit it all, I'm going to put... Right now there's just 1 or 2, and I wrote about 12 patterns for those books to go along with them, and I'm gonna stick them all on the website, so that should be up soon. Do you have a favorite book that you have written? Question from my daughter June, who is 7. She just read Tuesdays at the Castle and said it was the best book she has ever read. Thank you so much, June. I'm so glad. It's a favorite of mine too. But my actual favorite book that I've ever written, there are 2, and one of them is Sun and Moon, Ice and Snow, which is a retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is my favorite fairy tale. And the other one is that book set in Romania based on Dracula called Silver in the Blood. But June, you are 7 and you cannot read those books for at least another 8 years, okay? Because they are for teenagers. But those are my 2 special favorites. Megan asks, how many different covers have been designed for the Dragon Slippers series? They are my favorite series from my childhood, and I've seen so many different ones. Do you have a favorite? So yes, and there have been a lot of different ones, especially in the US, and there was a whole thing. The original cover of Dragon Slippers was drawn by Peter Ferguson, wonderful artist, love his cover so much. And he took a sabbatical right after that, and so we had to have someone else finish the trilogy, and that was Brandon Dorman. And then every few years, publishers like to change up book covers, give them a new look. There are fashions in book covers that change, and they like to go with the fashions. And so then we got the wonderful David Hone covers that I just adore. I do have a very soft spot for the original, that Peter Ferguson cover. I will never forget opening that box and seeing that beautiful book with my name on it and that beautiful golden dragon, and I cried. But the other time I have cried in a good way looking at a book cover was when I opened up the file to see David Hone's interpretation of Shardus in his cave for the Dragon Slippers that he did. Those are my 2 favorites, and I just bawled looking at both of them. And actually I have them right here. Hang on just a second. Just keep pointing at the chair. There's one. It's gonna grab these before. 2. Okay. Oh, did you miss me? Okay, so this is the original cover of Dragon Slippers. It was only available in hardcover. It is absolutely my favorite. I just love it so much. I love this woodwork design. It was just, especially for a first published book after so many years of wanting to be a published author, you could not ask for a more gorgeous cover. So I really love this one. But I have to say that when I saw this cover, and David sent me the sketch with his notes about how you can see the stained glass windows sort of dangling in the air behind him, and you can kind of see it a little bit on the back. I cried, because I'm like, yes, that is perfect. That's exactly what it should look like. So I love both of those. Those are my 2 favorites. But let's see. A and B ask, we are wondering how long it takes you to write and research each book. When do you normally write each day? So it depends on the book. For a lot of my books, I don't really do that much research because I'm just making stuff up. So I might need to, look up fashions for a time period I'm sort of looking at or something like that, but it only takes a few minutes. Like I said, Silver in the Blood, I actually researched for 3 months before I really started writing it as well. But I usually just write until I'm done, and it kind of depends on the book too, like how long it takes. The Castle books were fairly short, and I pretty much started writing them and wrote for about 6 months. We edited for a few months, and then they were able to come out. So I would say like maybe up to a year is generally, for one of my middle grade books, it takes about a year to get a book out. or to like get a book finished. Some of my books have taken longer. Silver in the Blood I actually worked on for a couple of years. The writing of most of my young adult books, because they're just longer and they probably have a few more characters in each of them, probably just the first draft writing took about 9 months for each of those, and then you always figure at least 6 months for editing and things like that. So that's about that. It just depends. And then Grace asks, hello, just found your blog and saw this, and I have the most important question of all. When is the next Castle Glower book going to be out? We just finished listening to the last book, Saturdays at Sea, and I know the story is not stopping there. We smell a romantic future for Seelie and Pogue. The series has been making our quarantine life a little bit more exciting. Thank you. So thank you, Grace. I'm glad that I could help with my books. So the thing about Castle Glower is the next book will be out never. It will never be out. It is a 5-book series. It is completely done. I feel like they have had plenty of adventures and now they get to live happily ever after. And I do get asked about the romance all the time in those books. And the thing is, because they are middle grade books and they're supposed to be very young middle grade books, I can't really have the main characters have a romance. They are too young to have a romance, really. I mean, Pogue's a couple years older than Seelie, but he's not that much older. If I started having them, like making out and getting married and stuff like that, I've had people ask me when they will get to see them start kissing, dating, get married, and having kids. And if I did all that, they would end up being, that would go into young adult and then adult books. And so I'm not going to do it. We will just all know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that one day in like 10 years, Seelie and Pogue will probably get married. Lulath and Lila probably won't even get married for a couple more years. They're probably going to be engaged for a very long time because she's also very young. And so they wouldn't be middle grade books anymore if I followed these characters up until they were adults. And I'm really excited that you guys want that to happen, but I don't think my publisher would be cool with it. I think it would be a little weird. So we're just not going to do that. That's it. Those are the books. So, but thank you anyway. I'm glad you like them. So it's a 5-book series. Most of my books are trilogies. And then there's Castle Glower, which got 5 books. So, but thank you guys for all of your questions and for our giveaway. From my very first post for my AMA, I got a question from someone named Lewis M. And Lewis M., you are a winner. And also in this post, we had a question from Mary, and Mary, you are our other winner. So if Lewis M. and Mary would please email me, you can go through the website and just email me and say, hey, I'm a winner, and tell me your address, and I will send you a lovely signed book. Also, if you have a book of mine you want to pick to get signed, you can totally tell me, hey, I've always wanted a signed copy of Dragon Slippers, or hey, I want a signed copy of Silver in Blood. Just tell me and I will get you that book, okay? So Lewis M. and Mary, please email me so you could get a prize, and thank you guys for playing along. Have a good day and keep your hands washed.